What is this club? This club is actually a fucking social experiment. It's actually a soap opera of the highest degree because imagine telling us Chelsea fans at the start of the season that first of all we'd sack Thomas Tuchel 5 or 6 games into the Premier League season to then appoint Graham Potter from Brighton, to then sack Graham Potter in, late March, early April, to then appoint Frank Lampard, who was the manager we originally sacked for Thomas Tuchel to come in and win the Champions League in 2021. I mean, the ultimate mindfuck Chelsea Football Club, and it's just a Chelsea thing. I think that's the only way we can actually describe it, to be fair. But yeah, if you haven't got the gist of this video by now, Frank Lampard is returning to Chelsea as interim manager until the end of the season, and essentially in this video I'm going to be going through, first of all, whether I think it is a good decision or not from the board to appoint Frank Lampard as interim until the end of the season. Second of all, going into detail on the future of Chelsea in terms of the short term, with those 2 legs over Real Madrid in the Champions League and the remaining games in the Premier League as well, and the long term with obviously who we appoint as the new manager, whether it be someone like Nagelsmann or Luis Enrique or someone else. And then finally, giving you a bit of an insight on how I think Frank Lampard will set up this Chelsea team, between now and the end of the season. So let's just get straight into it. But before we get into it, subscribe to the channel right now. You'd be an absolute king of the highest order if you did hit that big, juicy, succulent subscribe button, because we are closing in now on 2,000 subscribers. So every single one of you that hits that subscribe button will be an absolute legend to help me get there as soon as possible. And leave a like on the video as well, especially if you are a Chelsea fan and if you are hyped for this news that Frank Lampard will be returning to the club that we all love. And without further ado, less of the bullshit, more of the talk. Let's get straight into this video. So first of all, the big question, am I a fan of this decision? Absolutely. Honestly, I really am. Just from an emotional standpoint, first of all, given the fact that Frank Lampard is obviously a man that, as a true Chelsea fan, I absolutely adore the man. He's simply put the best man to ever exist, I think it's fair to say. Just not really over-exaggerating things, but on a serious note, obviously, I think it does make a lot of sense, especially from the perspective of Todd Bowley and Behdad Ighbali and the Chelsea board overall, given the fact that, in my opinion, I think the main thing for it is they don't have to rush now into a new managerial appointment, because I think that was, from what I can gather from the media and the likes of Fabrizio Romano and David Ornstein, etc., and what they were saying on the situation, it looked like the original plan was to appoint a permanent manager, as soon as possible, whether it was a Nagelsmann or a Luis Enrique, like I said, to navigate us through those Real Madrid games. But I was more of the perspective of, I think I wanted an interim manager until the end of the season to just carry us through this dreadful season, if we're being honest, the season that we really want to forget, and just to have the new manager avoid these problems that Graham Potter obviously dealt with, which in my opinion was one of the main reasons why he was sacked in the first place and why he struggled so much, which is the the confidence issue with the squad right now, the morale issue in the squad right now, given how poor we've been this season. The fact we're 11th in the Premier League right now doesn't help, and of course the fact that we've got an absolutely massive squad, 33 or 34 first team players right now. It cannot be easy to deal with whatsoever, and I think a new manager like Nagelsmann or Enrique, or someone who came in, would be instantly dealing with that pressure and instantly dealing with those problems, which would obviously probably hinder him, especially in the short term, in terms of getting the best out of this team and really giving his reputation a bit of a boost towards the Chelsea fans early doors, which is massively important at a new club. So I think it makes the most sense from that perspective. I especially think it makes sense appointing Frank Lampard of all people, because if nothing else, right, the Chelsea fans have suffered so much this season with how we've been playing dross football, having Thomas Tuchel sacked, going through Graham Potter where it wasn't a great time overall, I think it's fair to say in hindsight, and yet appointing a manager like Frank Lampard, who the fans will, 90% of the fans anyway, will massively get behind, will absolutely love. It'll bring a bit of a boost, a bit of an atmosphere, a bit of an energy and a spark between the fans and the team overall, and will just give a massive energy, a boost of energy on the pitch, which I think is massively needed, especially in that second leg against Real Madrid at Stamford Bridge, where Stamford Bridge is going to be absolutely bouncing, and there's not going to be one Chelsea fan out there, not one true Chelsea fan, that's not going to be absolutely on their knees and desperate for Frank Lampard to succeed as manager. And to be honest, I think it massively gets the fans on side in the short term as well, which is massively important for Todd Bowley at this moment in time, and gives him thorough time now to really think about who he wants to appoint as the new manager, because this is one of the most important managerial appointments he will have in his time at Chelsea, absolutely no doubt, especially given the fact he really now has to get this one right for any sake of his own credibility, especially with the fact he's already sacked Thomas Tuchel and Graham Potter now, only being at the club for 7 months or so. And to be fair, if I'm actually being honest, I think the job that Frank Lampard did in his original stint at Chelsea, obviously from 2019 to 2021, I actually think it's not really underrated, so to speak. I think that's probably the wrong word to use, but I think it's definitely over-scrutinised in terms of the fact that if you really look at the context behind what he achieved at Chelsea in such a short space of time, getting top 4 in his first season, getting Chelsea back into the Champions League, given the fact he had a transfer ban to obviously deal with, inheriting a lot of young players for the first time like Mason Mount, Reece James, Fikayo Tomori, Tammy Abraham obviously as well, and dealing with the squad of players who'd lost their ultimately best player and probably only world-class player at the time in Eden Hazard, who was such a massive player, especially given how much he contributed to the success the previous season and of course massively in previous seasons before that as well, and getting us into the Champions League in that season, in a competitive league I think it's fair to say. And then the season after, we were top of the league for a few weeks in a season where it was absolute carnage at the top of the table given how many teams were top of the table. I think it was a record-breaking season for how many teams were top at a different stage of the season, and then getting sacked after our first barren run under Frank Lampard. And obviously in hindsight it worked out for us because we got a Champions League out of it after Thomas Tuchel took over. But I think the job that Lampard did with us is overall massively overlooked. I don't think he was absolutely unreal by any stretch of imagination, and I do think that his system and his time at Chelsea did have its flaws obviously, but he's certainly coming into a much better team overall in terms of the quality. He didn't have players like Enzo Fernandez, Joao Felix, Mykhailo Mudryk, Badiashile, Wesley Fofana, so I am very interested to see how he does with a better team overall, and obviously a much thicker squad as well, which I think will probably play to his downfall a little bit if he can't deal with it from the start. But yeah, overall, to conclude, obviously as you can tell by what I'm saying here, I'm an absolutely massive fan of this appointment for a number of reasons, especially given the fact that it now gives Todd Bowley and the board overall a lot of time to thoroughly think about who they want to appoint, because it is, as I said, a massive decision, especially given how many managers are actually in the running. I mean, we've seen 5 or 6 managers properly linked with this job, so it can't be one that's just thought about and decided on in 3 days. And yeah, just going on quickly now at the end of the video, like I said, to go on to how I think Frank Lampard will set up with this Chelsea team, particularly looking at the 2 legs against Real Madrid in that Champions League tie. I think he'll go with probably a 4-3-3. He has flirted with the idea of a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 in his previous stint at Chelsea, but I think it looks something like this on screen, with Kepa in goal between the sticks, and a goalkeeper who's obviously, in my opinion, having a good season for us and way more capable in possession than Edouard Mendy is. Reece James and Ben Chilwell as the fullbacks, who will be very important in this Frank Lampard team. In the system, they do like to play, high and wide with the overlapping fullbacks, helping out the wingers. Thiago Silva and Wesley Fofana at centre-back. Badiashile, I think, will play a lot more in that centre-back position, especially with his passing range, as Frank Lampard's style of play is more focused on being direct rather than being, possessional based. I think he'll go with almost a double pivot of Kante and Enzo Fernandez if Kante can stay fit, and hopefully we get the absolute best of N'Golo Kante in those 2 games against Real Madrid, and that could be an absolutely brilliant midfield showdown for Kante and Enzo against the likes of Tchouaméni, Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. Mason Mount in the number 10 position, and yeah, it looks like Frank Lampard will more than likely bring Mason Mount back into the team, and hopefully he can reinvigorate Mason Mount from a confidence perspective and in terms of his performances overall, because yeah, Mason Mount was playing some very good football under Frank Lampard and obviously is massively rated by Lampard. We've got Mykhailo Mudryk on the left hand side of the front 3, who I really do think could benefit from Frank Lampard if he picks up his confidence. In terms of the system, I think it will really suit Mudryk, in terms of the fact that Frank Lampard's system does like to have overloads on one of the flanks, and obviously if we overload down the right flank, it will give Mudryk a lot of space naturally down that left hand side, which he is so effective in, and being direct as well, and being comfortable in counter attacks. Again, Mudryk, it would be perfectly suited to him down to the ground, so I think Mudryk could really benefit. I think Kai Havertz will more than likely be the striker. Obviously Tammy Abraham would ultimately be the striker for Frank Lampard if he was still here, but Kai Havertz I think will be the main guy up front, because he is the the profile of striker that most suits Frank Lampard's style of play, in terms of a striker who's able to hold up the ball, drop deep to get involved in build up play, press from the front, and with aerial duels as well if needed. And I think we could potentially see, the right hand side is an interesting one, because I think we could even see Hakim Ziyech come back into the team, because obviously it's no secret that he did have a good relationship with Frank Lampard and probably played his best football in the Chelsea shirt arguably under Frank Lampard in that short stint that they were with each other at the club. But I just think that we have to shoehorn Joao Felix into this team somehow, and I think that will probably happen under Frank Lampard, so I've stuck him out on the right for this one. Obviously he'll play more centrally, which will allow Reece James more space down the right hand side to operate, but I just think Joao Felix is going to be such an important player for the rest of the season in pretty much every game we play, Champions League and non-Champions League, given how much he offers us in terms of creating stuff out of absolutely nothing, getting the fans off their seats, and yeah, just being an absolute technical baller overall. I think we could see Noni Madueke feature a lot more in the Premier League as well. Also, obviously him and Badiashile are not registered for the Champions League, so aren't eligible obviously to play in the Champions League, so I think we'll see him and Badiashile a lot more in the Premier League, given the fact that Madueke is a winger who's perfectly suited to Lampard's system in terms of being a left foot right winger with a bit of pace, being direct, and obviously able to go inside and outside as well. So yeah, overall that's how I think Frank Lampard will set up against Real Madrid and in general with this Chelsea team. Obviously I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he did opt for a 3-back, because I do believe, and I'm of the opinion that I think if he did change to a 3-back in his later time as a Chelsea manager, I think he would have held on to his job a little bit longer and got a little bit more stability previously with the team, but obviously that's in the past now, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did go with a back three, but based on the evidence I have when he managed Chelsea before, I'm going to go with a back four, and more specifically a 4-3-3. Okay, so I've just ended the video, right, and there's just one more thought that's come into my head about this, right, and it's that Frank Lampard is actually some man for taking this job. He really did not have to take it, to be honest, and if you're looking at it from his perspective alone, it's a massive risk for him to take this job, given the fact that he could maybe hinder his reputation a little bit more with Chelsea fans if, you know, we get, say, hammered by Real Madrid over two legs and, you know, finish in the bottom half of the table or whatever. Not that it would be his fault, obviously, but you know what I mean. You know how football fans think nowadays. And interim managers, normally when they come into a club, it's normally for one of two reasons. Either one, it's to get a payout towards the end of the season, and number two, it's to, you know, try and tempt the club into giving them a permanent contract beyond the end of the season, which obviously Frank Lampard knows he's going to be here for a short period of time. And I think, given how much he loves the club and cares about the club, he's one that, it doesn't matter how long he's here for, he will give every bit of and give absolutely everything to get the most out of this Chelsea team and, you know, help Chelsea out as a football club, because that's just the type of man he is. I know for a fact he's a great man because I've met him before, and yep, he's just an absolute gentleman, honestly. And obviously that's not the main reason why I'm so happy he's appointed as manager of the club. Obviously it's because he's an absolute club legend and will get a massive boost out of the fans, and yep, hopefully the things I would do, you don't understand, the lengths I would go to see that man win us a Champions League title, you actually do not understand. But yeah, just a quick thought I had, and it's just that fair play Frank Lampard, you are an absolute legend, and yeah, it just shows why he's so adored by this fan base. So yeah, back on with the video. So yeah, Chelsea fans, let me know in the comment section below how you feel about this appointment. To be honest, as a Chelsea fan myself, I don't see any bad sides to it whatsoever. Now don't get me wrong, Frank Lampard as a manager obviously does have his flaws, or else he wouldn't have been sacked from Chelsea and Everton, but I am looking at it from a positive perspective in terms of the fact he's only coming into the end of the season to get a bit of a boost out of these players in a season where we've got absolutely nothing to play for, especially in the Premier League and even still in the Champions League. I don't think whoever we'd appointed would have given us a massive advantage in terms of winning the Champions League overall. So I am a massive fan of this appointment, as you can tell by what I've said in this video. And yeah, leave a like on the video if you did enjoy, like I already said, and subscribe to the channel as well. Like I said, we are looking to hit 2,000 subscribers, so help a brother out and hit that big subscribe button. It would be absolutely massively appreciated. And yeah, I'll see you guys later, and yeah, chat to you later.